All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Eff Yeah Podcast. I always want to throw that extra word in there, but we are working on the rebranding, so it's just the Eff Yeah Podcast, formerly the Eff Yeah Bro Podcast. I am here tonight on a Monday night of all nights. I know we normally do this on a Sunday night, but we're doing Monday night. We didn't want to take away from the games audience last night. We felt like we owed that to the NFL. We weren't going to have pull that many people away from it. So here we are on a Monday night doing this thing. And
you'd have been one co-host down if that was the case. Just like
yeah, we'd have had you, but I mean, it just wouldn't have been, you wouldn't have been as engaged.
Not here.
I don't think. Yeah, not present. You just been here like cursing the whole time, especially at the end there. But we won't get into that, or maybe we will. We'll talk a little bit later. But yes, so I have with me my usual co-host, who I will let introduce himself, and then we will get into our absolutely amazing guest who's joining us tonight.
What's up, guys? Welcome back. It is Nick. Again, Lord Emperor of everything Todd does not want to do. Part of the Project Titan sales team. I do the website here and there.
Yeah. All right. So then with us, we have someone very special that we met actually at our sponsor today, Mr. The Gray Ghost Comics. So if you're ever in Tifton, Georgia, go check out Gray Ghost Comics. Our boys, Andrew and Scott, absolutely amazing. And we will dig into later about what they have coming out this Tuesday and Wednesday. But with us, we have Mr. Steve Ekstrom. Am I pronouncing the last name right? I've butchered some last names lately, so now I'm actually going to ask. Okay, did I do that right? All right.
So I appreciate it, but yeah.
We have Mr. Steve Ekstrom with us. I'm going to let him kind of introduce himself a little bit, and then he's not going to really tell you exactly how awesome he is, and I'm going to follow up and talk about how really cool he is.
I'm just a guy that puts his pants on one leg at a time, but when I do, I make comics. No, I'm Steve Ekstrom. I'm the senior editor at Sumerian Comics, which was formerly Behemoth, and I also write and letter comics for a living, and I do that full time. So. Not too shabby. Living the dream.
Living the dream. Now we did meet at our host, Gray Ghost Comics. I keep pointing here because on my screen it's over here. Yeah, there we go. So Gray Ghost Comics. So we did meet there. We met at their one of their anniversary events. I think it was the anniversary event. It was this year. And it was really cool because, we're going in and we're talking to these events. At the time, I was looking for an artist. I needed to find an artist for a project that I was working on. And, we met at this event. We're talking, we're having fun. We're talking to customers that are coming in. And just off the rip, you're like, okay, cool. Here, you're looking for an artist. Here's like 7 people that are absolutely amazing. Like, go check them out. But it was really cool because, again, like we didn't know each other from anybody else we met that day. And you were very quick to just like, hey, yeah, check these people out. Check this, and everybody you provided, by the way, was super high quality, just on the level. And I thought that was really cool. And I think it spoke a lot towards your character in terms of trying to help others and just kind of help them develop and grow. And I thought that was really cool. So I wanted to say thank you for that. Because again, that was awesome. So, you have a book coming out, and I want to talk about that before we jump into anything else, because this is one of the coolest things, and you're making this happen, right? So you're making this dream happen and going out. So you've got a book coming out. Tell us about the book.
Okay, so I need to kind of preface this. I was brought onto this book to just letter it at first. It was just an 8-page story that was a police story set in Serbia about smuggling fuel. And Vanya Miskovic, the co-writer on the book, who's been putting this thing together, needed somebody to letter and edit it. His English is his second language. And the first thing I said to him was like, dude, I don't know a lot of like pro-cop books that are going to be sold in America. And I'm, I lean to the left, but I still... It's still a job that's very hard to do, and I wouldn't do it. So I commend people who do.
Respect.
And not every cop is, somebody that's going to beat somebody in the street. So I was trying to like explain to him the difficulties of this. So I was like, we need to expand your conflict. And I said, what about something like human trafficking? Because you're like in a filter country for this. Yeah. So he was like, yeah, I know all about it. I read the papers, and I was like, okay, well, let's take it from there. So it turned into me lettering and editing the book. And then after I started to kind of edit him as I lettered and edit his dialogue and stuff, he was like, do you want to just like be the co-writer? And so we came up with Soko, which is short for Sokolov, which is the name of the corrupt young policeman in the book. And Soko is Serbian for falcon. So it's kind of got this cool, kitschy, it's his nickname at work kind of thing. And he's got the kind of like cantankerous older partner that's too old for this shit, the Danny Glover type, and his name is Lazar. And they accidentally stumble across this guy who is smuggling fuel, which is something we don't do in America. We don't have like a fuel smuggling issue, like gas, but in other, third world countries and other countries in like Europe and Africa, that's like a big thing, like making your own gas and stuff. So it's just one of those things where, you get this idea and you kind of run with it. And so the story, Soko, is kind of like The Departed with like systemic corruption meets Scott from Grey Ghost is actually pinging me right now. And I'll get you a shirt. Jeez. No, it's fine. He's wanting PDFs for the book because we're going to do a signing at Grey Ghost. Anyway, it's kind of Departed meets this procedural level of something like The Wire on HBO, where you have kind of this intense look at how the police operate within, systems of crime. So you've got these two beat cops that are then like assigned to what's essentially a customs issue and an immigration issue. And they kind of have to work with the customs people because that's how these people are smuggled from the Middle East into Western Europe and vice versa. So like families go out of the Middle East and then women and children are brought in for nefarious purposes, obviously. And so you kind of are introduced to these two guys in the midst of this. And there's a third character that's like an assistant district attorney that's kind of this like ball busting badass woman. And she's kind of on top of things and she's on the straight and narrow. And basically you kind of are introduced to the corruption slowly, but it's like a sinking sensation. So like the first issue, some bad shit happens. And then the second issue, it's like, oh, that's awful. And it gets worse. And then the third issue is like, okay, maybe there's some, no, still bad. And then the fourth, it's like The Empire Strikes Back. And you're just like, really, Steve? This is how you guys are going to end this? With like bad on bad on bad on bad. And there's like a glimmer of hope throughout the whole thing. And it's, this unpredictable character.
So you were, I appreciate that you sent us the preview version to go ahead and read. And that was super cool. And I felt very special because, again, it even says there, like, this is a preview version. So I'm like, oh, I've got something like this hot. Like, I got to keep this, right here. So I'm going through it. I'm reading it. And I'm just the whole time, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I like this. Like, this is awesome. I love where it's going. And I'm not sure if obviously we always kind of associate it with something maybe else that we kind of like. And so for me, there was one particular scene. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there was one scene and it made me think of The Shield. And I don't know if you ever watched that show on FX. Oh, yeah. There's a scene and I'm like, oh, son of a, like, that's awesome. Like, I can't believe they did that. I didn't see that coming. It was a really good, a kind of like mid-story twist where, again, like I didn't know. I'm like, oh, so this is okay. Cool. This works. Like this, and then, like you said, kind of the deception gets in there, and then it was really funny because I reached the end of book one and didn't realize I was at the end of book one. And I think that's kind of one of the things when you have it in your hand. Obviously you're flipping through, so you're kind of getting towards the end. But so I'm reading the digital, and I got to the end, and I remember thinking at the very end, I was a little mad. I'm like, oh, like I'm at the end of this book, crap. And then I was really happy.
Scroll anymore.
Yeah, I got to the end and I'm like, fuck, like, that's the end. Like that's awesome. That's cool. But I want to keep reading. And then I was sad for like half a second. And then I remembered, wait, he sent me issue 2 too. And then I went back and I read issue 2 and I'm like, okay, cool. Like this is legit. So I was very excited after I read it. So I was just like, dang, like this is really good. Like this was solid. Thanks. And when you talk about the fact that it's like, hey, I don't know how well like the pro cop book's gonna read it, it's really interesting. So I don't remember reading like a police procedural or anything like that as a comic book. Like it's just not something I typically read. I tend to gravitate towards kind of more of the superhero stories or like The Walking Dead or something along those lines. But when I was reading this, it felt oddly new, but also comfortable at the exact same time. And it's like right in my wheelhouse of like what I like to read. And I was just like, man, that's great. Like fan-freaking-tastic. I was one of those things where I was just like, I really enjoyed this. And then on another level, I was just happy for you. I was like, holy crap, like this is awesome.
Yeah, I watch a lot of like television. I read a lot of books, and I feel like the key to good accessible storytelling is pacing. So as long as I'm keeping you moving throughout the environment, your mind does the work. I don't have to do that work. And that's the joy of comics, is that if we tell the stories properly, with the proper pacing, with a minimal kind of take on environments, so that you're not over explaining or like, what's the word I'm looking for? Where you're, you don't want to tell a story, that where you have to kind of, you don't have to elaborate. Your readers are intelligent enough to do that legwork in their mind of like, okay, yes, I understand that this is a police department. I understand that he's receiving a text message. I don't have to like announce to you, well, now I'm getting a text message. Now I'm telling my mother to jump off a cliff. And there are people who have to learn that lesson in comics before they learn how to, you got to take the car for a spin before you take the Ferrari out for a drive. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I have a degree in creative writing and stuff like that. But even that was not the educational structure that I needed to make comics. I had to learn comics by making comics and telling stories and making mistakes. And so I really appreciate the fact that you found it engaging. Everybody that I've talked to at a professional level, I've been really fortunate to have like Howard Shakin look at it, Mark Wade, Ross Ritchie from Boom, Dan DiDio, and they're all kind of like, the brisk pace of this book is what is going to sell it. And it's just because it's just scene. And
but it's also not too much. So it's interesting because you talk about that. And a lot of times when you do that scene, it can become a little too much when like there's too much in the scene, and then you don't have kind of that breather. So like the way we talk about the way it's paced, but it's even just paced well within each scene. Like when you're going from scene to scene, like each scene is just enough. Like it's like you're going from a 7-course meal, and like each one's just enough to go to the next one. You're like, oh, okay, cool, like I'm good.
That's a good analogy. I've learned over time that with comic books, especially floppies, monthlies, a 22 to 24 page comic book, if you look at a good one from Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, any of the masters that tell these things, there are roughly 9 to 10 scenic interchanges, which in your head, that seems like a lot.
It does.
But if you're properly telling your story, you keep the dialogue tight so that there's not any of this like extraneous talking that doesn't progress the story, you're turning pages. And it's about, like when I outline my stories, I don't write full outlines anymore. I do these bullet pointed things. It'll say like, Steve goes to the store, +1. So that's 1 page that I can do that. And then Steve is inside the store and a guy points a gun at him is 2 pages. And it's in +2. And I do that until I have 24 points. Then I'm at. And that's how I take the plane off and land it all in the same issue. And to try to control that narrative, that it's kind of like a cost wave. You have the storytelling wave, and each little wave is what's, a Freitag's pyramid, which is, start, apex, denouement, and you just do that, And it started out being this little short 8-page thing that's the very intro where it's like a car chase, and it's beautifully illustrated by Antonio Fuso. Like I had never thought to illustrate a car chase before.
Right.
Or to tell that story. And Vanya had already done that with Antonio. And Antonio, he's worked on G.I. Joe. He's worked on a couple books that have already been optioned at like Mad Cave and Dark Horse. And he's an exceptional storyteller. And so I was able to kind of take those scenes that were already written, and then we wrote a couple of more expanding on Vanya's ideas. And our process is like, he writes the initial scene, and then I come in and back cleanup, and I'll polish it. It's like a rock polishing machine. He hands me a rock, and I tumble it around, and then I've got something shiny to show him. And it kind of works for us because, again, he's got an amazing mind for like a narrative, like an overall story. But again, his English is a struggle for him, like catchphrases and slang and stuff he's never heard before because he lives in Serbia. So I got to color things, and it was nice that I got to bring this element to it. And I got to also kind of say, well, as a guy he's a lawyer, so he's got a background in law, and I've got a background in storytelling. So it's like me going, well, we can do this, but it's better if we go this to this to this than it is to just do a straight line, because we create conflict, create, different forms of, there's more than one type of conflict in a story. There's, you have man versus man, man versus self, man versus environment, all these different, there's like 8 total different conflicts you can have. And I was just trying to make our story complex, but still in a straight linear fashion, because again, you said it, you can overcomplicate things by putting too much in. So, it's been really fun telling this story, because I never would have imagined I wanted to tell a procedural. But then I looked and I thought about Ed Brubaker and Criminal, and I thought about other guys with crime books, and I was like, nobody's done a cop procedural. And we all love, I don't know anybody that doesn't love The Departed. The Wire is considered one of the greatest shows written in all time, and everybody loved The Shield. So I was like, why don't we do this? There isn't anything like this on the market.
There you go.
And I'm glad you mentioned The Wire, because when I was reading it, I was thinking, I was like, this feels familiar, but I couldn't picture. I was like, I can't put words on it, on what it felt like. I mentioned The Wire, and then it clicked just like that. I was like, oh, that's perfect. That's exactly what it is.
There's a lot of.
I love The Wire. It's one of my favorite shows ever. So.
Yeah, me too. I really like the candid intimacy of the policemen doing their jobs, and the human. Like poverty works into crime so much, and I work in low-income housing, Section 8 housing, stuff like that. So you see a lot of disparity, economic disparity, and that applies in countries like this, where you've got one form of government and it's kind of structured downward, and there's agencies within agencies, and they're systemically corrupt because the money goes upward, and it's so. To have that, and then to have the ability to show a guy who cares about his job, 2 guys that appear to care about their jobs, and one of them just happens to be, kind of corrupted from the beginning, and you don't really know it until you kind of get to this point where you're like, oh shit, he's really bad. He's really a lot worse than we thought.
There's definitely a point where it becomes pretty obvious, yeah.
Right, and then in the second issue, you kind of get to see that even though he's corrupt, there are people far worse than him.
Right.
And his boss and the captain, Constantine, which is probably like my favorite character in the book. And he's just this scumbag, and I like scumbags. So it's we don't get to be bad people. Like, we go every day, we get up, we abide by the law, we don't hurt people, we go to work, and this guy is just like. There's no stops. There's nothing stops this guy. And there's a joke in the back of 2 that I know when Vanya read it, he was like, "Don't you think that's a little too much?" And I was like, "Nope," because that's why bad guys are bad guys. Because that's not something we would do. We're supposed to not like them. Frank Miller said there was a very famous quote where it's kind of like, people say crime doesn't pay. Yes, it does. That's why we do it. And that's kind of where I took that.
I loved it. I enjoyed it. I'm a little actually sad now that I've got to wait for issue 3.
I'll send you a PDF of 3. It's done.
I'm in. All right.
I got you.
Appreciate you.
So
Steve,
hang
on real quick before we get into that. So for people who want to get your book, what's the best way for them to go out and try to make that happen right now? Because I believe it's not coming out till April. Is that correct?
April 12th, but it's, so many stores can sell it pre-order.
Okay.
And then some stores have what's called like FOC. So they can order, like stores that are bigger that do more volume can have like an extended date to order things. Final order cutoff is what that's called. But they can go to a comic shop. If they're in Valdosta or like this area, they can either go to Cool Comics in Valdosta, or they can go to Tifton and go to Scott's store, Grego's Comics.
Yeah, Grego's.
That guy. And both stores are cool. And they can just say, hey, I'd like to reserve a copy of this. And it kind of like, it lets the owner know, I need to order X amount of copies.
There you go.
The upside, if you go to a higher volume store in like a bigger city, is that there are chase variants that only the retailers can get.
There you go.
So if they order 10 copies, they can get a 1 in 10 Aran Guerra from Scalped cover. He's from Serbia, and Vanya met him and we paid a lot of money for this cover, so I want people to see it. And then there's a 1 in 25 raw version, black and white version of that, and then a 1 in 50 version of the painted cover A by Francesco Tomaselli, who does cover art for Spawn now.
Beautiful.
So we've got this like star-studded cast of talent, and then me and Vanya, and it's just kind of like, who's the Steve Ekstrom guy? And I'm like, I'm just a journalist. You don't pay attention to me. I'm just
Just don't pay attention to me. I'm here. I mean,
don't pay attention to the weird guy writing the story, because it's dark.
Well, so Scott Andrews said that you obviously everyone can go pre-order it at Grey Ghost Comics. So let's make sure
Absolutely.
do that.
I'm going to be there signing copies, hopefully that weekend. April 15th, I think, April 13th or 15th, whatever, 14th, 15th, somewhere in there. I'm going to happily sign everything in that store. I'll sign babies' heads, whatever.
There you go. I'll say that because what we'll do with this is we'll cut it into reels and all these fun things. So for anybody who comes across this between now and April, preferably now, get out there and go to your local comic book shop and ask them to go ahead and order this book. Make sure, because sometimes they'll go in and they'll order a smaller amount because it's a newer book getting out there. But this book's awesome, so ask them to order it. Make sure they're going to order a few extra copies. And get your boy good to go, because I'm telling you, you're going to read it, you're going to enjoy it, you're going to want issue 2, you're going to be like me and already want to read issue 3, and it's going to be solid. So, yes. So, sorry to cut you off, Nick. You had a question.
Yo, you're good. I was just going to say, Steve, so what got you, let's go back to like your childhood. Like what'd you read growing up, and like what got you into comics?
Well, I was like a 3-year-old when I got my first comic book, but my big gateway was Star Wars and Superman the movie. There are a lot of people in the industry that are older than me. Like I was 3 years old, but that's like my first human memory is like going to the theater and being that asshole couple who took their kid to the movie theater, and me, the crying monster that's ruining it for everybody. And there's the scene where Clark Kent gets in the phone booth for the first time, and he comes out and that pimp goes, "That's one badass outfit," and the guy goes, "Hey." And he catches the helicopter, and Lois is there. And he's like, "I've got you, Miss Lane." And she's like, "But who's got you?" And little baby Stevie just stared at the movie screen for like the next 2 hours. He was just in awe. And so I have this human memory of being held in this movie theater, just like, what the hell did I just watch? I'm watching Fly and Star Wars. So my father took me to the store, bought me a bunch of action figures. And everybody in my family, because I was, this little toddler that before all my cousins were born and stuff, would take me to the store with them. And they would buy me, a lot of my family called them funny books, but they would buy, comic books for 25 cents, 35 cents at the time. So I had already amassed 200-300 of these things by the time I was like 5 or 6, because people would just buy them for me every time I rode with them to the store, Yeah. And I loved Spider-Man. I loved Star Wars. I loved Superman and Batman. All the basics, awesome. The meat and potatoes of comic books. I was into it, and it became a thing for me. Like my first allowance, I think I bought like G.I. Joe number 36. Transformers number 7 was like my second dollar I ever made. And I just have these memories of owning these things. And I was a military brat, so we moved a lot. And that was a static thing for me, is to go to like the Armed Forces bookstore and buy comic books, because a lot of people kind of go crazy without a hobby. And it kind of gave me something to look for, because it was hard to fit in and move around a lot. So there was always this thing. And I also grew up watching soap operas with my grandma. So The Young and the Restless and Days of Our Lives, these things are just serialized soap operas for children at the time anyway. And they still are, for the most part.
Children too, but yeah.
But yeah, my favorite thing as a kid, like anything that was connected to a toy I played with, I wanted the comics. The He-Man comics that came with the action figures, holy shit. Yeah. Like some of the art in that is just, those are like masters that they got to do these little tiny comics. And you get introduced to things through G.I. Joe and Transformers, and then the next thing you know, you're reading Superpowers and, whatever else. And I remember finding the Uncanny X-Men when I was like 9, 10, and Alpha Flight was probably my favorite comic book as a kid.
Nice.
Yeah, I had a weird like fetishization of Canada. I've dated 2 Canadians. Alpha Flight was my thing. It's weird, and I'm not that big of a Wolverine fan, so to like Alpha Flight as much as I do is a little bizarre. What about you guys? What did you guys read as kids?
Man, so as a kid, I loved X-Men. I remember one of the first ones, like my dad got me, was like some G.I. Joes, and then he got me it was the Death of Superman. So he got me like when the Death of Superman came out, like, he got me number 1, and I remember him bringing me this, and I was like 10. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I'm about 6 years older than you. Yeah, I was like 16 when that came out.
Yeah, so that was like the one that I remember, and then I was always a big Hulk fan. I was a big Spider-Man fan. I remember I got out of it like while I was in high school. It was kind of one of those things like high school. I really wasn't back in, and I got back into it around probably like 18, 19. Jeremy Jackson and Tomas Hector, shout out. I would go hang out at their house, and there would be a pile of just like Ultimate Spider-Man, and like the Ultimates was when I really like got back into it. I loved Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate Fantastic Four, Ultimate X-Men. Like Planet Hulk is still to this day one of my absolute favorite comics. Like again, just got me back into it. And then at that point, I wanted to read everything that I could get my hands on. And then it got to the point when we started going to Comic-Cons in like 2015, 2016, I started picking up indie books. And then I started freaking loving indie books because no matter what you got, whether it was like the most well-written thing or somebody's first book, there was just so much passion on each page. And like I loved it. The only downside was that you would buy book 1 and like indie people are really good at putting you on a really solid cliffhanger. And then book 2 might not come out for 3 years.
Or ever.
Yeah,
right.
This is a small ride, but now I'm on like a big indie kick. Like at a Comic-Con, like if you've got an indie book at a Comic-Con and I'm there, at some point I'm gonna buy it. Like,
that's cool.
Yeah, so
that's cool. What about you, man?
So I was late to the party. I didn't actually get into them till almost we started going to cons.
Yeah,
and then it was just never. I was always into sports at the time, so I never really had time to do. I played football in high school and kind of all that stuff, so I didn't give myself time to really do anything like that.
You talk to girls, right?
You got married first. No, yours is Walking Dead.
I got married. I got married third.
Oh, okay. I got married last. So.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, Walking Dead was your jam.
It was, yeah. So I started with Walking Dead. That was when I first started. When the show came out, I watched the show, and then I think Todd told me he had read the first comic or something like that, and then mentioned how they were just completely different, and they were much more graphic and stuff like that. And I'm a big horror buff. I love horror movies, so I was right up my alley. So I got into them, and I have just about, I think I'm missing one hardback book of the whole Walking Dead comic series, and that just kind of branched off. I went. I think Power Rangers probably the next things. I grew up watching Power Rangers as a kid. Every day after school, sitting there watching the shenanigans for whatever the 30 minutes it is, and started getting into that. And then
that Boom series is awesome.
Yes, yeah. And then I think it's just kind of branched. Whatever, I love Carnage and Venom and stuff like that. So I've got a couple of their different books. I like Harley a lot. Her story's been really fun to read. So. So I was kind of late to the party, but I kind of went full gung ho when I did get into it. So
I think it's always interesting to meet people who are later to comics. Nathan Yoakum at Sumerian also is a late bloomer with comics, and it's interesting to see what you gravitate towards as an adult that's finding this what is traditionally a children's medium, and we've kind of aged out of children being the primary audience. Because video games and toys are so much more accessible. I was harangued into reading Walking Dead because I started working for Newsarama and the Best Shots crew reviewing books, and we were kind of all sitting around in a little forum post, and it was just kind of like, so do you read The Walking Dead? And I was like, no, what's, I don't see the big deal. It looks like a George Romero zombie.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, that's exactly what it is, but it's good. So I remember I was like living with my aunt and uncle. My grandmother had passed away. So I was just kind of like living in their guest room. And I had like, don't do this, kids, but I had downloaded the first 36 issues. Like I torrented them. And I sat down at like 9 a.m. and I started reading. Mm-hmm. And then I looked and I was like, oh, I've gotten through like the first 6 or 7. Let me get some lunch. And then I looked and my shift for wait tables was rolling up at 5:30. And I was like, I don't feel like going to work today. So I called a buddy and gave up my shift and I ordered a pizza. And then all of a sudden, it was
before you know you're through the whole series. Yeah.
And I read the first 36 issues and I bought 37 the next week. And I bought everything after that. And I recently just sold all my Walking Deads. And it was really kind of a weird experience because I really enjoyed that book from start to finish.
Yeah.
It was the last book I bought. Like I stopped buying regular comic books month to month. Mm-hmm. The month that Walking Dead ended. Mm-hmm. 183, I think, 193. Whatever.
93,
yeah. And that was the last month that I dropped like $100 on, books. And because I spent more time making them. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to read anymore. Like I was like, I don't want any more of these things permeate my brain.
So yeah. Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I kind of go with a similar path. When I'm writing, I don't read. But I've made a point to at least now take time once a month to read. And I just take a break from writing and I read because I do find that it helps me to at least see what else is happening and what other people are doing and kind of get out of my own head very but it's interesting you bring that up. And again, I'll even say Walking Dead, I did not like the TV show. I'm one of the few there.
Same. You and I are the same.
But I loved the books. Sure. I absolutely, I was like, again, Nick, he gave me the hard copies. And I was just like, just read it. Literally sat in my house collecting dust until like one day the internet and the power were out. And I was just like, all right, cool. Like I'm going to sit down and read this. And I plowed through the first like two,
hard first 2 or 3, something like that, I think.
Yeah, which covered like the first like 2 or 3 seasons of the show. And I was just like, holy crap, like this is so much better than the show.
Well, it deviated so far from the comics, and I know why they did that. Like I was working at Newsarama, and I was kind of the Robert Kirkman guy at the time. And I got to go to like the press release where you met everybody from the show and the showrunner. I was sitting with like Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld. It was really weird just to be around them and, to have Robert being like, hey, come hang out with us. And I was just like, oh, okay. I'm nervous.
Don't pay attention.
My voice went up 80 octaves and I sounded like Mickey Mouse then. But like, I was so into it. And then the show came out. And after that first season, I was like, I was bored.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, man, the pacing of the book is not replicated in the show. And the show's this human drama, with the horror element. Just like The Last of Us. The Last of Us is just like a really elevated version of the Walking Dead TV show to me. Mm-hmm. Now that I've been watching that, and it's great. Nick Offerman deserves an Emmy for that 3rd episode where I'm crying my eyes out for a gay couple, and I'm just like, oh my God. This is so life affirming. And it was just wonderful. And this week's was great too. Like I highly recommend that show. It definitely does what The Walking Dead couldn't do for me, which was me seeing this relational horror show. Where
on that, do you think it? So I played the game, and
I played a little bit.
The game is fantastic. Both of them are fantastic, and so. Walking Dead kind of, I know they had the comic to go off of, but The Last of Us already had the story written in essence, and they're just making it mainstream, I guess. Do you think that made a difference?
I think what these guys learned was that you could deviate if you wanted to, and they have a little bit here and there, but the story was already solid. So if it's not broken,
don't fix it.
Exactly. Right. Just leave it alone,
Yeah.
And like I said, that 3rd episode was a departure in a way because it gave you backstory on a character that you don't really get a lot of backstory from in the game. But, he was already gay in the game.
Yep.
Nobody cared. Nobody gave a shit about that. And now we got this really fleshed out life story from him and his partner. And man, I was like just weeping at the end of it, because I was like, I'm not even in a situation with fungus people and the apocalypse. And it's hard enough getting on Bumble and dating, and these guys are losing each other. And you're just like, man, that is awful. I feel so bad for these people. But it was just a really well told story. And from start to finish, and it was worth every minute of the riveting human drama that you got to. And that's at the basis of any story. That's where the merit is as a storyteller. Is you need to find human connectives. It doesn't matter if it's Superman being the immigrant from outer space, or if it's Batman, who's this guy who's dealing with the trauma and the loss of watching his parents being violently murdered, or Spider-Man inheriting this mantle of responsibility from his dying uncle because he acted out of turn. You have all these things that drive us forward, and that makes us more human. And I think that's the key component to good comic books and good video game. I mean, a video game is nothing but really a moving comic book if you think about it.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so let's chat. So Sumerian.
Okay.
Obviously, so you just got back from a trip. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was recently hired as the senior editor for Sumerian Comics. Sumerian was Behemoth. Behemoth was basically two guys that are really quite talented at what they've done. Nathan Yoakum and Ryan Swanson, and they started their business at the beginning of the pandemic. And a lot of people struggled and flopped, and they didn't. They survived the pandemic and actually thrived during it, and had a couple of really cool hit books hit the market and blow up for them, kind of giving them some street cred as indie comicers. And I was introduced to them through a guy named Mark Bertolini, who's a comic book creator. He's got a book coming out with us soon. And we just I met Nathan through him, and he and I started talking on the phone while I was freelance editing some projects, and we just kind of hit it off. And it was like that Step Brothers moment where like, did we just become best friends? Yep. And it turned out that he and I would talk on the phone like a couple of, schoolgirls, like 3 nights a week. And I was always like, well, Ryan doesn't really talk much. He's like, oh, he's not a talker. And so for like the first year, it was just me talking to Nathan about ideas. I pitched a bunch of licensed things because he was like, hey, man, there's a catalog, pick some things out. So I'm a horror guy too. So I was picking out like obscure things. And like there were a lot of really good movies that came out in the last 5 years, like The Rental. I did a pitch for The Rental that was a sequel book. Have you seen The Rental?
No, I've never heard of that.
Okay. It's what's the kid's name? His brother, it's James Franco's little brother, his first directorial debut.
Dave.
And so Dave Franco is in the movie, and he's the director. And it's about these two brothers who are going on a weekend getaway with one of them's married and one of them's got a girlfriend. And they're going with their partners to an Airbnb that's on the Pacific Northwest. And it's kind of this like idyllic scene. And there's some drama between the two brothers and the two girlfriends. And there's some drug use and partying, and there's a kind of this like dude who's the guy who owns the Airbnb, and he's this like piece of shit, redneck, racist-y kind of guy that they have conflict with. And then all of a sudden they notice that something happens, and then they notice that there's like a camera in the shower, and they think, oh, that creepy dude's watching us. And one of their dogs goes missing, and as they're looking for the dog, the third act of this movie starts. And this dude with a rubber mask on just kind of like rises up out of the fog. And you're just like, what the hell is that? And he looks kind of like a rubber mask of that Six Flags old guy, that and it's like a dude, kind of the bulky dude with a mask that looks like that. This like creepy old man, white guy, bald white guy mask. And he systematically kills all of them. And then he cleans up the Airbnb and he hides and waits for the next people to come along. And he's like an Airbnb serial killer. And it was the first 2 acts are a drama, and that third act is just stabby stab, you're getting murdered, or like terrifying. And the hook on the movie was so good that I was like, hey man, I want to pitch a second story where my friends go to a fantasy football retreat and I kill them all. And so I got photo references of my buddies from my fantasy football league. These are my best friends from college. I wrote out this whole structured thing about how I murdered these like 8 dudes at this fantasy football retreat. And it's the same guy. It's this Airbnb guy. And it was really good. We never heard back. I was so pissed because it was just like, man, this is one of the coolest things I've ever written. I'm murdering my friends. Can't get any better than that. And it was such a letdown. I pitched that, and I pitched a Strangers book. And the Strangers only had 2 movies.
Yeah.
And the second one, they killed all the characters.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. I was like, this is awful. Because the coolest thing about the Strangers one was that, again, it was like a movie that starts out like a drama with human connections. You know, the first one's about a couple that can't figure out how to get married. And he proposes to his girlfriend at a wedding. And she's like, the fuck's your problem? Don't propose to me like this. And then the second one's about this, you know, troubled kid, and the parents are really wrestling with sending him away to private school. And so there's these really great human moments, and then chaos shows up, and it's this murderous trio that's just doing it because they can, you know. And so I wrote a story that was in between those two, but I made it like a gearhead story, so it was like on the road.
Yeah.
With like tow trucks and people crashing into you and like killing people in gas stations, and I was super into that and never heard back from that either. And it was such a letdown because it was a good pitch. I pitched Peaky Blinders to do like extra content for them.
Yeah.
And it just fell apart because they were canceling the show. Dude, I had four miniature like one-shots that filled in the blanks on everything between season 1 and season 5. Like anything from like what they did in the Somme, like what happened to them tunneling, what happened when they came home, like when they were venturing back from France, what happened to Tom Hardy's character when he got shot in the face, and then I told one called Old Man Shelby, and it was just basically Tommy Shelby is like an 80-year-old man, and his piece of shit grandson, who is just like Tommy Shelby's father, who was also a deadbeat gambler, gets into trouble, and then Tommy has to go to town and like get him out of gambling debt by shooting some people. And it was just oh, I was so disappointed when they were like, yeah, we're not interested, because
I mean, I'm
like,
hooked. I'll read them.
I could turn them into something else, but it wouldn't be the same. Yeah. But yeah, no, anyway, back to Sumerian. Sorry, I derailed there. Nathan kind of kept me around and kept me involved, and him and Ryan, I started hanging out at shows with them, and I like both of these kids so much, and now I get to work with them full time and annoy the shit out of them all the time with questions and scare them by saying, hey, I'm going on a podcast and I'm just going to talk the way I want to. And they're just like, they're millennials, and I'm a Gen Xer. They're like, great, Steve, just please don't do anything cringy. And I'm like, everything I do is cringy. Let's go. Yeah, no, but they're probably going to watch this and shake their heads at me for saying that. But
I'm going to cease and desist later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Cut that. Like done.
That means it's real. That means it's really real. But yeah, no, and they kind of brought me in, and we started talking about like me coming on to work on projects, and we had a departure from the company who went to Whatnot, Kevin Rodatelli. And they were like, we need extra hands to work on projects so we can get things done. So I was hired. Adriana was hired as the creative director. And now there's 4 of us. And it's a fantastic 4 versus the dynamic duo. And shit's getting done. Like I've been working on files all weekend. But mainly my role is to help Ryan with getting things ready for press. Because I letter my own books, I'm very familiar with the process of how comic books need to be lettered and how the pages need to be designed. Like before the show started, I was talking about learning InDesign because I had done everything by hand in Illustrator and Photoshop. But InDesign is kind of the way to make books across an industry, all the print industries. So it's just learning how to do that. And I picked it up. I kind of had like a breaking moment where he showed me how to do one little thing, and then I saw the Matrix and the sailboat. It all made sense. So I'm still like getting my sea legs with that and like editing pages and fixing things. But also we all kind of uniformly look at talent. Like I was able to prattle off 7 artists to you because I look for artists all the time that are, reasonably priced for an independent comic book company with a budget.
Yeah.
And, I think I recommended a lot of Italian guys.
Yeah.
At the time. I'm working with some really talented people from all over the world right now. I am working on a book with a band under the record label. That's a science fiction, kind of a weird science fiction book. And I'm pretty sure the artist is from Asia. I'm also working with Irish artist Robert Carey, who's absolutely brilliant. He's working on one of the Paradise City books with us.
Yeah.
Which I can talk about because we've already announced it, but we're changing the name of it. I'm also working with an Italian guy, Antonello Constantino. He's also very talented. We have Tiago Brando, and as a colorist, as well as Emilio Lecce. Emilio works with me on Soko as one of 2 colorists. We have Stefano Simeone and Emilio Lecce coloring our books, and they're both incredibly talented guys. And to see things come together where you put these guys together and they don't know each other, but they like admire each other's work and stuff, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And to have Emilio say, you're letting me color Robert Carey, and it's like, yeah, and he's like, I'm so excited, I love his work. So then all of a sudden you just get this beautiful, collaboration from these guys. I'm working with Marco Federa on a book, and he's, God, I don't even know where to go with this guy. It's like Jim Lee and Howard Chaykin had a baby, and his artwork is just like so beautiful. And I mean that completely as a compliment and not as like some kind of like weird comparison. And I'm also working with my good friend Antonio Brando from Portugal. He and I have been making comics here and there for 15 years, and I finally was able to be in a position to give him paying work that was significant and licensed, and he deserves to be seen. And he's just this incredibly talented guy. I'm actually working on a couple projects with him. We've got a creator-owned book that we're working with a guy who is also very talented, works in the video game industry, and it's in development. So I've kind of got a bunch of irons in the fire right now. I've probably got 6 books in process at Sumerian where I'm writing them, and then I'm also editing like 6 other books. Wow. So it's a lot, but this is all I've ever wanted to do in my life.
There you go.
And so it's like, when I got out of college at 24, my dad looked at me and he was just like, so what are you going to do with this English degree, creative writing degree? And I was like, well, I really want to write comics, but I don't know where to start because I was too old to get an internship. Like when I discovered what I was going to do, I had already passed the ability to get an internship. So he was like, well, I live in San Diego, right? And I was like, I don't even know what that means. And he was like, well, we're gonna go to San Diego Comic-Con. I was like, what's that? And he was like, you just collect these things.
Just wait.
Who the hell are you? My son doesn't even know his hobby, which is my dad's been my whole life with comic books. He's like, you don't even know how to bag and board things. Let me show you. And that was when I was 11, and now it's but it's like he kind of held my hand that first year and took me to San Diego and like showed me how to network, and
that's awesome.
I did that for like 4 or 5 years, and then you stumble into things, and so I stumbled into a job at Newsarama by trying to create an entity on MySpace where I was going to be like Ask a Ninja. Do you remember that for YouTube? No. There was this thing, a YouTube phenomena.
Very kind of, sort of.
It was like Dear Abby, but the dude's a ninja. Yeah. And he gives and it's in like a bad, it's like really inappropriate now, but 20 years ago it was very funny. So I wanted to be a fat, shirtless Lucha Libre guy with a mask on, yelling about comic books.
Fantastic.
And I was going to call myself the Masked Comic Dork. And that's my email address to this day. And I had written some reviews on my MySpace, and it caught the eye of a guy named Troy Brownfield, who's a reporter at Comics Beat. And he just kind of said, why not you dump that and just write reviews of Steve Ekstrom? and come write for Newsarama. I didn't know what Newsarama was.
Yeah.
Because I was not an internet guy. I was doing a day job and buying comics and minding my own business. So I called my friend Adam Tracy, who was the managing editor at Toy Fair magazine, and he was my assistant editor at the literary magazine at the college. And I said, dude, what the hell's a Newsarama? He goes, that's like the CNN of comic book news. That's our direct competition at Wizard. And he goes, they're offering you a spot to write book reviews. Take it. That's your in. And so my first review I ever wrote was like New Avengers 26, when they brought Hawkeye back to life and he like slept with Scarlet Witch, and it was just like, it was a romance comic.
It was spoilers.
It was fucking whimsical. And I was just like, what a great comic. And it started a love-hate relationship that I had with Brian Michael Bendis' work for many years, and because I loved it. And then I wrote some negative reviews for some of his books, and he didn't like that. I won't talk about it on camera. It's not worth digging up. But I was referred to as a Newsarama dickhead in a comic book. He said if I had a nickel for every Newsarama dickhead. But yeah. So, but yeah, getting back to Sumerian, I had banked enough tenure in doing things and lettering comics and editing other people's comics that I have a little bit of technical savvy about me, and I understand the business. And I'm very grateful that I get to work with these guys and make comics, because they're both full of ideas and they both bring really unique perspectives to making comics that when we were sitting in that office, there were days where I'd just kind of look at them and I'd be like, man, I'm really proud to work with these two dudes, because this guy didn't start reading comics till he was 18. And this guy is, kind of this weird, grumpy dude all the time. I'm kidding, Ryan. But they really bring a lot to the table. And they're self-made, and so am I. And it was just like we kind of fit the same mold together. Nice. So I'm really grateful to get to make comics with these guys and have a role where I can help people improve their stories and polish their rocks.
I freaking love it, and I just got to say congratulations on making it happen.
Thanks.
Yeah, really.
It's just very cool. And when we met towards, I want to say it was like September of last year, like we were talking through and talking about your books and what was coming out, and just seeing the joy, like, because when you talk about it, like, there's sometimes when you talk to people in the industry, that's what it is, but like they don't might not have the joy anymore.
There's a lot of saltiness. There's a lot of salty
salt in the industry. It is what it is. But it's fun when you get to talk to somebody who's making that progress and still has a really good attitude about it. And that was one of the things, like, when we were talking, like, you were very solution oriented. You were very kind of just focused on how, like, it was going to be a win, and how you were so excited, and that was cool too. You were talking about, like, your book being in previews and just that whole thing, and I was just like, dude, that's freaking awesome. Like, that was so cool. And again, I'm beyond excited for you. Whenever you send the book over and we could take a look at it, I'm just like, oh, like, this is real. Like, this is legit. Yeah. I was, again, I was one of those things where I'm like, I was proud of my boy. I'm like, hell yeah, man.
Man, I appreciate it, dude. You have no idea. I learned early on. I did one of my first interviews where I was doing journalistic work for Newsarama. I got to meet Mike Carey when he was working on X-Men, and he had something really profound that he said during the interview, where it wasn't about the A to B success. Like, here I am, and now here I am writing Spider-Man. It's about the little things that are little successes along the way that sustain you to get to that point. And if I hadn't learned that, I would have never made it. Because, people want to see you succeed, but they don't want to see you succeed more than them. Mm-hmm. And so you don't get a lot of people believing in you. They say that they want to see you succeed, but they really don't. They just, they want to pat you on the back, and they want to say, I was there when he did it, but they don't really, like, I've lost a lot of relationships with people over the years. It takes a toll, because you have this mindset that it's not if, it's when. Right. And you have to sustain that, and you have to believe in yourself when nobody else does. You have to be kind of like the carnival barker for yourself. And sometimes you feel like an asshole. Like, I feel like such a tool sometimes when I'm selling stuff. But then along the way, you'll have people come along and say, my first show where I was behind the table signing things and selling things was in 2018 at MegaCon Tampa, the last MegaCon in Tampa. And I'm sitting across the way from Gerhard, the artist for Cerebus, who's been doing the art for this thing for like 30 years. And he's just this older Canadian guy. And I knew who he was, but Cerebus is this, reverent, this revered indie book that has existed since the early 80s. And I got to sit on a panel and talk. And then at the end of the weekend, his wife walks over and she goes, "Hey, Steve, my husband and I wanted to tell you that watching you sell comic books was the best part of this weekend." And to get validated like that lets you know you're on the right path, because you spend so much time wondering if you're on the right path, because there's so many of us that want to do this.
Yeah.
And you're competing with a lot of people who are faking it till they make it, or they're learning just like you are, or they really don't have a chance of making it, but they're still making it. So there's just a lot of stuff out there. You're wading through it, trying to get to, whatever your goal is.
Right.
My goal
Everyone has it.
I want to kill the X-Men. I want to kill the X-Men so bad. And, and I want to tell that Batman story where he shoots somebody with a gun, breaks his own code. I want to do I want to do dastardly things so people hate me. I want to be reminded that I put somebody in a refrigerator once, like Ron Mars.
So Soko makes so much more sense right now.
Especially number 2. There's a part in number 2 where Constantine says something and does something that's so terrible that you go, "What's wrong? Did somebody drop you as a kid, Steve?"
There is definitely, again, I remember reading it and I'm just like, okay, cool, he went there. Like, he did it. Yeah, he did the thing.
And that's where Vanya was like, "Are you sure we should do this?
Yeah.
This is going to make people upset." And I was like, "Good. That means we win."
You should.
Right.
No, here's the deal. I love and I respect the crap out of that. And it's funny you talk about like the selling the book. And for me, that's something where I've always been comfortable selling my books. Like that's fun.
Yeah.
I sell my books all day. That's cool. As a writer is kind of more where my journey is. And it's focusing more on trying to improve my writing and just improving the building of the book altogether. From point A to point B, but like you put me on the sales floor, I'm gonna go sell it. That's fine.
Right.
Right. It's another one of these ones we were joking around about how, like, I personally, when I'm at a show, I don't really take criticism on my book very well. Like, if you come up with me at a show and you start trying to like kind of give me feedback on the book, anything other than, "Hey, I really loved it," or something along those lines, like, but people will try to come pitch to like be my new letterer at a show, and they'll like talk trash about my lettering or something like this. And like the last thing I need at a show is someone like trying to pick my book apart, because all you're going to do is affect my ability to sell it, because you're going to make me start thinking like, "Oh wait, is my lettering not as good as it needs to be? Like, is this, it's one of those things that I'm just not a big fan of that." Now, after a show, I don't care. I'm very open to feedback, because that's how you grow and that's how you get better. But when I show up at a show and the show starts, from then until the show ends, like, just leave the feedback at the door. You either love it or you don't. It's all good.
I had a really bad show one year where I was at Newsarama. I was putting together pitch files, and I put together my very first comic book, which was a superhero comic, which it's really a crapshoot. When you're not, the fact that the big 2 owns 90% of the market share, 91% of the market share, and 91% of the comic books out there are superhero books. That's why the publishers don't really lean into superhero stuff other than because you're on your own there. And there are some superhero comic books at Boom and Dark Horse and things like that, but they're few and far between.
Right.
It's mostly genre fiction. So I had my little superhero book, and that I learned how to letter myself. And I'm just kind of walking around talking to people, and I ran into Robert Kirkman, and he was like, what do you got there? And I was like, "Oh, it's my samples. This is like the second artist I've been through with it, and I lettered the second one." And like, dude, the first samples I did had Comic Sans as the font. I mean, that's the kind of mistakes I was making.
So issue 1, kind of same. So issue 1,
so
kind of same.
I at least had comic fonts, but I did some kind of obscure shit with the lettering for sound effects and stuff. And Robert looked at my samples and he went, "Man, you need to fire this letterer because it's fucking terrible." and I just my heart sank, and I went, "I letter it." And he goes, "Oh, sorry. You know? And I was like, no, I don't know what I'm doing.
Man.
I'm just trying to do this to figure it out because I'm
Sure.
trying to save money. And I will say, as a guy who letters comic books professionally, that you can pay the letterer. The letterer is the most important person in the chain, because they're the first person that can remove your reader from the experience. And if bad lettering is what kills a book first. Art can be terrible as long as it's serviceable.
Right.
Story can be terrible as long as it's serviceable. It's still a story. But the second you have a design element that is pulling your attention away from the magic, it's ruined.
Yep.
And so, I studied Richard Starking and Nate Picos and Blambot for years before I even started charging money for my services. I did a lot of free lettering for years for people because I just wanted the experience. Yeah. And then right before COVID, I started charging money. And then I started actively editing people using my lit background, my creative writing background, to like help people with their dialogue, to like make it sound more naturalistic. You'd be surprised how many people, like, we talk casually and we talk fast.
Right.
I do not talk without using a contraction. But you'll find people that firmly believe that human beings talk and never use a contraction. And I'm like, those people can fuck off in my mind. I'm like, see ya. I don't want to work with you. If that's what you believe,
talking to them.
They're robots then.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it. I cannot go to the store. Sure you can't. Whatever. But but that kind of thing. And it started turning into a thing where I can make money. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of I had kickstarted my own books and things like that. And I started to realize when I did Terminal through Kickstarter that I liked the business part of it. I liked the production part of it. I really liked the control that I had.
Respect.
And all of a sudden, I was like, I could publish books. I could edit books.
Yeah.
And it started working out. But you find these things, and it's. I have digressed so far, and I don't know how I got to this point because I usually know how to double back.
We're going to a good place. It's all good. Just roll.
Yeah. But it's like I've been a storyteller my whole life. Like there are like movies of me telling Star Wars as like a 5-year-old to my grandparents, and doing all the sound effects and with hyperbolic reactions. And I found a thing that I was good at, and now I'm letting it kill me. And it was the coolest thing because I slept on a cot in Dallas. I didn't have a hotel room. I slept at the office, and I was miserable while I slept. But like a day didn't feel like work, man.
There you go.
It never felt like work. I got to sit at my desk with these two guys in front of me, and we would talk about shit, or I would ask some question and piss Ryan off because I didn't know what I was doing with what he wanted. And then we would go to lunch and it would be fine. And then I would come back and annoy the crap out of him some more. But it never at any moment felt like work. We play Fortnite like in our downtime together. I call it team building exercises. And for the first 3 weeks I was there, they were like, you want to play some Fortnite? I'm like, no, man, I'm fucking busy. I'm making comics. I'll play some later. And then we eventually played some Fortnite. And I was like, man, I'd rather be making comics right now. I don't know why I'm sitting here playing Fortnite. But, but it was fun. It was a nice break. The experience of making books is invigorating because, I mean, you're creating things that are going to entertain people. And there's nothing better than that.
Completely. And it's such a very unique thing. And then to go from, again, kind of doing it on the side and now doing it as your main thing, you've got to appreciate it on a level that you probably never could have if it didn't kind of go along this journey.
Yeah. It's terrifying and exciting all at the same time because I'm like, man, I got to pay rent. Yes. So I can't screw this up.
Right.
And at the same time, people go, everybody asks that thing, what do you do for a living? So they can judge you, Yeah. And I'm like, I write comic books for a living. And they're like, that's cool. And I'm like, yeah, right. It is pretty cool. But
it's kind of freaking awesome.
It is. At the same time, when I was a couple of years ago, I was dating somebody long distance and I was trying to get a job in Denver and I was interviewing for jobs. And so they would be like, so what do you do right now? I'm like, well, I freelance and I make comic books. Why would you want a desk job? And I was like, well, I'll be honest, benefits and a salary are a lot nicer than starving.
Money's okay. I like food.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
I can make comic books in my downtime, but man, going to the doctor sure is nice, and stuff like that. And there's still nothing like that in comics. You've got to get benefits if you work for somebody, if you're exclusive with somebody, and it's a real challenge. But I mean, who needs the doctor? Whatever. I'll just rub a comic book on it. Everything will be fine.
There you go.
Oh, good. I freaking love that. No, and that's awesome. And I mean, it's funny. I joke with my wife. So my wife, it's funny you mentioned, your co-writer for Soko being an attorney. And I'm just like, wait, attorneys can write comics. So my wife is an attorney. And my wife has known since she was, 4 or 5 years old that she wanted to be an attorney. The moment she found out she could make money arguing with people, she knew what she wanted to do. So me, I never had any idea what I wanted to do. It wasn't until like I was in my probably early 30s, 32, 33, like that I was like, wow, I could do this. Like, what do you mean I could do this? Like I could, try to go like turn this into something. And that was when I really figured out what I wanted to, kind of do and pursue this and try to make it as a passion. But it's still very much just a part-time, like, on the side on, again, like Tuesday, Thursdays, and Sunday nights, like I, hop in this room that looks like it's straight out of the 80s. My daughter's little pink tent and toy chest are in here, and I'm set up right now on a TV tray, and this is where like I do my writing, and I just like I do it, but it's so much fun. I enjoy every bit of it. It's one of those things that I get to do. And I will tell you this, for me personally, I have never more professionally fulfilled. Hope my boss is not watching this. I've never more professionally fulfilled than when I'm at a Comic-Con. All right, like at a Comic-Con, tabling with my books, or even if I'm helping somebody else sell their books, I don't care. That is like my happy place where I get to take what I have done for the last 20 or so years, which is selling, merchandising, all those fun things, and teaching people how to sell. And I get to take it and just apply it to something that I'm super passionate about. And a lot of times, and Nick will tell you this, we'll go to Comic-Cons and I'll spruce up the couple tables that are around me. I'll literally help them merchandise their stuff. That way it brings my table up. And I'll be the first one to be like, all right, guys, what do we want to do as a bundle deal? Like, so if they want to buy from you, me, and, the person I write, like, what are we going to work in and do these things? That way we can get out there, get the books out there, work with so many different people, and again, just continue to have fun. But Comic-Cons are like my happy place. But I will also tell you this, I mean, when I started in doing this, all I wanted to do was be on the other side of a table at a Comic-Con. Like that was enough. And then I did it, and I did it for a little while, and I did it well. Then I'm like, okay, maybe I want more. Like maybe I want to take it further. I've achieved that goal, so now let's go. And again, want to grow as a writer. I want to grow as someone who helps. And, helps produce different things and put together. So it's very interesting and fun to kind of hear about your journey, because it's one of those ones where everybody I talk to in comics, their journey is so different, and there's so many different twists and turns and different things, and it's really cool to hear about yours, because again, it's just you made it, and it's really cool to hear somebody who busted through and and still enjoys it on the level that you do.
Oh, it's frustrating every day, but yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I mean,
but like I started out writing poetry in college. Yeah. I started out, and the only reason I started out as a psych student, and then my mom joined the psych department, and then I was like, I'm out of here. And then I was like a secondary ed student, and I ran into like my high school senior English teacher, and she was like, no, get an English degree. And then I was like sitting in a psych class, and I started seeing somebody that I was really into, and I wrote her a poem. And I was like, maybe this will get me somewhere with this. And it did. So I was like, I'm going to be a writer. This is what I'm going to do. And I took this really terrible poem that was written by like a 16th century cavalier to my English professor, who was the resident poet. And he tore it to shreds and ripped me a new one. And this is where I learned how to handle criticism, was in workshops. Going back to your, thing where they come and say critical things, which everybody in the world today thinks that they can do things better than you because they hide behind a screen on the internet.
Right.
Armchair quarterbacking is the biggest problem next to the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it's always been a problem in comics. Hell, I was a part of that problem until I started learning how to do it. I was a fan who thought I could do better. And you meet so many toxic fans who I love saying, well, why don't you go make a comic book then? Well, I've got ideas, but I can't go to Marvel and DC. No shit, Sherlock. You got to learn how to make a comic book in the independents before anybody will take you. We need a sales figure before we take you seriously. And I had to learn that just like anybody else. But I was in this. I thought I was going to be this poet. You know, there's only two things you can do as poet. You can become poet laureate and teach poetry, or be a bum and work at a restaurant. There's nothing for poets. The last person to make a successful book of commercial poetry was Jewel, and this was in like the mid 90s. Everybody else is like a famous person that has a PhD or an MFA. Well, anyway, I'm in this workshop, and it's time to workshop my poem that I wrote for the week. And I had this one guy in class that's like my intellectual rival, who was the editor of the literary magazine. I was his assistant, and he goes, they hand you your poems with notes on them, and his had a big hole cut out of it, right where one of the stanzas of one of my poems was. Like he took an X-Acto knife and cut it out. It was just this empty square. I was like, oh, so he didn't like it. He goes, this is what I thought of that stanza. He pulls this little envelope out of his pocket, a little brown envelope, and he dumps all this stuff that looks like confetti in his hand, and he blows that little square cut into tiny little pieces in my face. And of course, you would think I would get mad. I started laughing because it was the most ridiculous way to tell me that I had written something that was bad. And he was right in a way. And other people agreed with him and had notes, so it made sense. But you have to develop a thick skin. And there are people in comics, in film, in any industry that don't have the skin for technical criticism. Now, granted, we're not going to talk about a guy that walks up to you who has no real reason to tell you your work sucks. But I think there are moments in comics like that all the time. Are you familiar with the Man with the Yellow Hat story with Rob Liefeld? Okay, so this guy comes up to him at a convention and hands him How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way and says, I want you to sign it. And then he was like, okay. And then he goes, and now I'm going to give it to you. And he goes, I don't understand it. He goes, you don't want me to autograph this? He goes, no, this is me helping you learn how to draw comics better. If that were Steve Ekstrom, and I don't care who hears this, I would have beat the dog shit out of him. Okay? I don't care if you think I'm violent. I don't care if you think I'm out of turn for saying that. You can't talk to people like that.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're a fan or what. You have no. It doesn't matter if you don't like somebody's work. You have no right to disrespect somebody at that deeply of a level, especially somebody that's millions of times successful than you. You Rube in a yellow. He had like a rain slicker hat on. That's why it was called The Man with the Yellow Hat. It's on YouTube somewhere. I'm sure you can find it still. But this was back in like 2008, and it made me realize that my fandom was toxic, and that I would never do that to somebody. No. And that when we talk about our work together, you know, if I make critical suggestions to people, it's because I really want your work to sing, you know, and that's where you're at, is that people, comics is a team sport. Whether we're on the same team, if we're working on the same book together, there is this notion that there's enough money for all of us. No, there's not. First off, we're all fighting for the same $20, period. There is no, there's money for everybody. Wrong. Do not believe that for a second. But I can, if somebody wants your book over mine, that's their prerogative. That's your choice. Yeah. And I'm not going to say, well, you're an asshole for not buying my book and you bought Todd's. No, that's your choice. You're a consumer. That's your freedom as a consumer. So there's just a lot of that.
Well, so it's interesting you bring that up because so for me, like, if I'm taking criticism from somebody that, again, is in the industry and knowledgeable, I can take something from that. That's fine. I'm good all day. Like, I love to learn. That's how I get better. But again, like when I'm at a Comic-Con and it's just somebody coming in, that's cool. It's whatever. It's in one ear, out the other. It's a funny story for the podcast later. It's all good. And it might fuel me to try to go sell a few more. We'll see how it goes. But it's funny also you mentioned, okay, we're all fighting for the same $20. And for my mindset, especially when I'm at a con, is like, okay, cool. If I can help the other people around me sell, if I can help them merchandise better, if I can help them pitch better, if I can just, again, help them sell better. Because a lot of times people have a good product, but they actually don't know how to sell when they're at a show. But if I can help them do that, that's going to make my area kind of seem like it's more popular. It's going to, nothing attracts a lion like a line. And so anytime that I can get the lines popping around me, I know that I'm going to be able to sell. So that's cool. So if I can empower the others around me, then we're going to do great. And it all is going to be well with the world. And it's kind of one of those things where, again, like we were at a show, and I don't remember which one it was, but I was talking with somebody, and they were like, man, I watched them pitch a couple times, and they watched me, and they're like, hey, what am I doing wrong? Right. And I was like, look, you asked, so I'm going to tell you. I wouldn't have said a word unless you asked, but you asked, so I'm going to give you some feedback. And so one of the biggest misses I see at Comic-Cons is people not actually asking for the sale. So what they'll do is they'll make their pitch, and it could be the greatest pitch in the world, but they won't talk about pricing, and they won't actually ask something simple along the lines of, does that sound great? Or do you want to pick this up? Or, does that work for you? Like, just simple, yes, no questions. Cool. They're either going to give you yes, or they're going to give you no. But there's like this 30 seconds of just like this super awkward silence, and then they take your business card and then they leave. Right. And that happens to so many people because they just don't ask for the sale. So if anybody who is ever attending a Comic-Con, if you happen to come across this clip, I swear to gosh, you will improve your numbers by 70% if you just ask for the sale.
100%. 100%. Yeah. That's something that when I am at a table, I guess maybe I'm a salesman at heart, but it's like I'm constantly making people aware. This is 5, this is 10, this is 15. Yeah. If you spend 50, you get all of it. And I'm trying to entice them by showing them the more they spend, the more they get.
Right.
Because that's the real, we pay a bare minimum for some of this stuff. There's a markup. Mm-hmm. And so any sale's a win for me. So it's like, if you buy a book for $5, I spend $1.40 making it. So I'm making a profit.
Well, right. No, on the other side of that too, you've got a reader. All right. Because 9 out of 10 times, those people that are at the Comic-Cons, when they buy these books, they're going to go real. Like
my first thing that I ask people is, what kind of comics are you into? That's my lead out.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
It 100% should be. And sometimes I'll change the word comic for stories just because.
Yeah. What kind of reader are you?
Right. Yeah. So if I'm getting people that are constantly, I'm not really into comics, if I start with stories, then a lot of times I'll find out kind of what they're into and I can transition. But yeah, it's one of those things where people get away from kind of asking those questions. And when you get at Comic-Cons, I find that the people who are the most successful are the ones that put their phone down, get away from whatever they're doing, and they just actually talk, make eye contact, and communicate and talk to people. And I have seen some of the best sellers that have had the absolute worst setups in the world. But they crushed it. And I've had some people with the greatest setups in the world who did absolutely nothing because they didn't put their phone down and just focused on trying to sell at the show. So again, it's interesting kind of chatting with you because there are so many levels to kind of what you're trying to do. And when you do it indie, you are having to do all of it. And there's going to be some things that you're not good at. And if you learn to hopefully delegate or work with other people on those, like you talked about, this is a team sport. So, when you can get those people that are at a high level, they cause you to level up. And it's just again, there's so many people that I have met at Comic-Cons or at signings or different things that have helped me grow immensely, more than anything else I've ever done. I've learned more from those people than anything else.
Yeah, totally. When I first went to New York 2 years ago with Behemoth, I was excited to get to help them set up their table because they had never done a show before. Yeah. And so I was like, hey, man, line these books up like this so they can see an abundance of your books. So they see that you've got a ton of product. And, these guys aren't dumb. They've already been selling stuff online. They've already done all kinds of other things with other little businesses. I didn't need to hold their hands or anything. I just helped them set up the table. But then it was on. Like, I was there to sell books. And, we, the second year we were at New York, when the sale of Behemoth became Sumerian, we sold more on the Thursday of that second year than we did the entire 4 days at New York Comic Con the year before. And we were just on it, and it was just, everything was clicking. We had discounted books for certain things. We were making packages for people. It was just, and when we did LA in December, it was the same. It was not that great of a show, but we knew how to sell books. All right. Like, we already know how to engage people. And, when you've got high-end items next to trades, next to floppies, and you've got variants that cost $100, it's hard to sell expensive high-end books. But if you've got the right people and you go, hey, this hasn't been graded by CGC yet, it's not even in their docket, someone will pick it up. Someone will go, oh, really? A buddy of mine, Brad, who I've sold a bunch of my personal comic books to, he'll call me and be like, I want one of everything that you've got that I haven't bought yet. Yeah. And then I'm at a convention putting a box together for $700 that I have to mail to him from the FedEx thing in the convention center, because the guy, he's like, I know you guys have really high end, collectibles that are, it's just a matter of time. And we have metal covered comics, like those metal plate covers. Yeah. He was the first one to get one at CGC, and it came back a 9.8. And he was just like, we were all kind of like, really? That's amazing. But 9.8. Maybe we should be doing that at our end at the office.
That's cool though. I love that. And those, like, it's so funny too, because again, you'll talk to people and you'll talk to them about like bringing more merch or bringing more books, doing variant covers, and everybody's always got an excuse as to why they don't do it. And then that's one of the things, like, everyone's just like, oh, I don't do it because of this, or I don't do it because of that. Get over the excuses. Like, just create it, bring as much merch as you can, bring as much merch as you're physically able, because you're going to get that one person that wants to get everything.
When you're a publisher, it's different. Like, we brought too much of one couple of books. Like, we brought like 4 or 5 boxes of this book that didn't sell a single copy. But now we've learned, these things sell at shows because they're video game related, or it's related to like the motherfuckers on Netflix. We have a comic book. We have MFKZ. And it's like, people see that and they go, oh, I saw that on Netflix. We sell it. So we obviously focus our stuff on who's there. So we bring books for the people that are there, and we bring books for things that are recognizable content that from other mediums, and it sells. And that's, like I was telling you before the setup, we're looking at maybe going to WonderCon and MegaCon a week apart, and the logistics of that's going to be tough. Yeah, but we were on the phone today talking about what would sell, and because we all love selling comic books, and it's like, you get to the show and it's go time, and it's like I'm an extrovert, so I'm energized by this the whole week. The only thing that hurts on me is my feet by the end of it. And I'm just like, every part of me is like, I love being here doing this. My feet hurt. I just want to go eat something and have a drink and then go to my room and go to sleep so I can get up and my feet quasi hurt until the end of the day where they really hurt. And that's all I want to do is sell comic books. So it's fun. But yeah, no, that's when you're independently doing it and you're behind the table by yourself, your setup does matter. The way you engage people is I watched you do it too. And I was like, that's a guy I could get along with because we both do the same things. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, that guy's a salesman. That he's got, and well, you meet a lot of people that make comic books that are kind of introverted or socially inept. And again, those are obstacle people. Like, I'm happy for them that they're making comics at the rate that they want to. Sure. But I'm on a track that's going upward, and I have to get those people out of my way so that upward mobility keeps happening. And I always feel like I sound like an asshole, but I'm competitive. And you have to be competitive if you want to be successful.
So I love that, okay, because I completely agree. So I'm one of the guys, I'm usually walking around shows. And at this point, you go to a bunch of shows, and a lot of the same people, right? Because you meet on different shows. So I'm always like, all right, cool. What are you at? Like, if we're like we're cool like that, it's like, all right, what have you sold? How many are you at? Because I'm competitive as heck. And they will tell you, like, I come back all the time and I'm like, yo, so-and-so's kicking our ass. Like, we got to step out. Yeah. Or on the other side, I'm like, yo, we're blowing them out the water.
Right. I'm not looking to, like, defeat anybody, but
it's fine.
I made $1,000 on Free Comic Book Day. Who does that?
See, there you freaking go.
Yeah. And I was just like, I showed up for work that day.
So just for fun, I'll tell you, we did that too.
Right.
Yeah.
and you're happy to do it. And Scott gave us a place to sell books, and it's just like, sure, I could sit here and just watch you look at my stuff, or I could engage you and show you that I love this stuff and that you're going to love it because I put my love into what I do, and I care about what I do, and I'm not phoning it in. I'm not doing this half-ass thing where there's a lot of people who are like, this is my best effort.
Yeah.
If I am saying that when I make a comic book, I am failing. If I can't look at my work objectively and go, next time I'm going to do this a little differently because I want it to be a little better. I want it to enhance. I want it to elevate. I'm not doing it right. But there are people who are like, this is my best work. It's my baby. You can't tell me any different. Those are the people who flub out. Or they sit at the back of the convention center for their whole life and they sell their Rudy Poo comic book that they made and they're happy. And I grew up in a home where I was constantly edited by my parents. I think that's another reason why I came up as an editor, is that my parents were constantly going, that's not good enough, fix it. That do this too, improve this so you get a better grade, so you win the science fair. You have to apply yourself. And now I bring that to my work on my own. And to have that ability is, it's kind of a gift, but at the same time, it's like I'm never satisfied.
Yeah. So
I'm okay with that, though. I'd rather never be satisfied than be completely resting on my laurels.
There you go. I think somewhere in there's probably that happy medium where you find that always wanting more, but while enjoying what you have. Like I think there's that happy medium somewhere in there. But at the same time, like I don't know, I'm with you. Like I feel like when I'm satisfied with something is when I stop pushing as hard and when I stop chasing it the way I need to, and I stop. Again, when you get comfortable and it's just, I don't know. I'm not ready to be comfortable yet.
I'm ready to be comfortable when something gets optioned for film. Okay. When I got money coming in from Netflix or Amazon, I'll relax a little bit. I'll untighten and I'll be able to unpucker from my chair a little bit and that'll be fine. But until then, it's like you've got to be balls to the wall and you got to be on target with everything. It's got to make sense and it's got to hit. And I want people to read SoCo. And it's hard because I work the day job where I'm working for the company publishing it. And then I can't work on the marketing part of my book until I'm off the clock. And that's a conundrum I'm in. And it sounds so horrible, Steve. It's actually a lot harder than it seems to juggle those things. Yeah. Because there's a conflict of interest there.
Yeah. It's conflict of interest. You also, again, time and energy. And that's kind of the big thing too. Like it requires a lot of time to do it right. It takes a lot of energy to go at this at a high level. And you only have so much of it. Again, I set aside time, again, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Sunday nights are my nights where I'm doing comic related stuff. And I can't tell you how often I get to like Tuesday night and, it's 8:30 at night and I've put my 3-year-old to sleep and, I've hung out with my wife for a little bit and I'm like, okay, cool. I need to go start working on a comic. And I'm just like, I already put in a 10-hour shift. Like I'm ready to call it a night. But again, we get to do this and you get to go be passionate about it. And, I get it. It's cool. It's fun.
And it lights you on fire. Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Oh yeah. Like as soon as I get off here, I've got to work on a script for a book. Because it's my time to write, and I'll probably write till about 2 a.m. And I'll bang out 6 to 8 pages of script. It's a 22 page script, so I've got I'll bang out the second issue in 3 days, and then I've got to shift to another story and write it for a little bit. I'm writing 3 things at once right now, which is for a guy that's at my level, that's a lot, because even the dudes that work at Marvel, they write a book a week kind of thing. If you can write 4 books a week at Marvel, you're kind of doing you're on the right career path, I think, when you're at the big leagues. And I am trying to build myself to that speed ahead of time. And I write full script. I don't write bullet points. I don't write, little jagged things that artists have to flesh out. I write whole, entire fleshed out full scripts from point 1 to the end. And I write in segments of anywhere between 6 and 10 pages at a time, and or sometimes even 12 to 16 if I'm at a good clip. Yeah, it's hard when you get on a roll. You're rolling, and it's just you don't want to stop. A lot of times I'm blacking out at the keypad. It's okay, it's time to go. Time to take my big ass to bed. This is ridiculous.
It's when I find myself at my stopping point is I'll be flowing and it'll just be good. And then I'll hit this one thing that I just start struggling at. And then all of a sudden, I've lost the flow and I do it over and over. And then then I look down and I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, I should be asleep right now. This is why I'm having this problem. My brain has stopped working.
I start to disassociate. Yeah.
And
it's weird.
So, it's funny though, is that when I go to start back writing, again, 2 days later or whenever my time is, I go and I'm like, I'm good. Whatever I stopped at, like I write, that's 5 minutes in, and I'm done. I'm past whatever the hurdle is, and I'm on to the next one. So I've kind of started to learn my own like physical and mental cues of just being like, okay, cool, it's time to stop.
Your limitations, yeah.
Yeah, you're just wasting
Absolutely.
time now. So like, go sleep. So again, it's interesting and it's cool. Like it's fun. So
You'll see where I've made mistakes because artists will contact me and they'll be like, Steve, there's no page 14. You completely skip the page, and so I like have to like shift everything, or actually I go, oh, I wrote that more. I planned on it being 3 pages long, but I did it in 2, and then I forgot.
yeah.
And or like I fell asleep and I said, well, I'm stopping.
Mhm.
And then I just started on page 15, and I have to go in and fix things or add things at the end. I had one where I missed 2 pages in 2 different parts. And so that guy's like, dude, seriously, page 13, page 19, they're just not there. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And, it's fixed now, but it needed to be.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I had a similar situation where that happened, and I just went and I decided to go ahead and use that page to like introduce a character that wasn't actually going to be in it for like a couple books and try to make myself look smart. And I thought it was just one of these things, and I'm like, okay, cool, like whatever. It was a stupid mistake. And then I remember being at a Comic-Con, and I was working with Kevin Joseph, and he does Tart with Scout Comics. And I was joking around, and I was just making that joke about how I made that mistake. And he's like, "Man, I did that too." It's like, here. And he literally shows me in his book 1 where he introduces these characters, and they're going to be put back in like I think it was like book 6 or something like that. And he's like, "Yeah, man, it works great." I'm like, sweet, I'm not the only one.
Yeah, that's wild. I don't think I've ever done that, but that's a great hack, actually.
It's like, okay.
Okay.
I had a free page.
Isn't that how Gambit was introduced? He was actually in like an annual on 1 page, and then like 2 weeks later the book came out where he was like showed up.
I think you're right, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, it works. So, all right. Well, we are heading towards the end, so we'll ask the last 2 questions. We pretty much ask everybody towards the end of this. So, first off, what advice do you have for anybody who's trying to get in the industry now? Obviously, you talked about kind of banging it out of the indies, but if you're somebody again trying to get in the indies, man, what's that advice you can get somebody to help them learn something?
Start small and look at independent comics. Don't write stories for yourself. That's your natural inclination, but like you can't just write stories and expect people to want to read them because they're your idea. You have to go out and see what people want, and you have to study the market. Like go to Barnes and Noble, look at what's on the shelves, look at formats. One of the things that bothers me as an editor is that there are creators who don't heed format. Like you'll come in and you'll be like, one of my books is 32 pages, the next issue is 22 pages, the next issue after that's 28 pages, the next issue after that's 36. Paper's cut in increments of 8 and 16. You have to make things formatted that reach a standard in the industry. Brick and mortar store retailers are the most important people in our arena. They sell the books. Those stores are dwindling every year. And it's our job to protect those guys by making good content that people want to buy. So when you make irregular content where your price point changes, those guys don't trust that. Right. They want things that are static, that always cost $3.99, that are always going to sell them 10 copies if they order 12. So it's like, to me, if you're starting out, you need to figure out first, what do I need to do to make the ideal package to sell at the retail level? Because if I can't compete with a store level book, you're never going to get into the store. You're always going to be at the back of the convention selling a pamphlet that you made on a Xerox machine. And it's always, if that what makes you happy, fine. But when I showed up to make comics, I said, I'm going to write Spider-Man one day.
Yeah.
And I haven't gotten there yet, but I'm going to write Spider-Man one day.
Respect.
And so that's the first piece of anything I would tell anyone is study the market and learn what people want. Because if you're just selling things willy-nilly based on what you're willing to make, you will have a harder time. It's easier to sell a slick-looking product that looks like it can sit next to, if this book is ours, Sarah Lone is ours, and we license this from a French publisher or Italian publisher, whatever. But your book has to sit next to this book and compete. And if it can't sit next to this book, if you bring your book in that you colored with crayons and you use Comic Sans font, like I freaking did.
Oh,
Which one, if these weren't your books, which one would you buy?
right.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the hardest lesson I had to learn, and it was taught to me by Marvel's current editor-in-chief, C.B. Cebulski. I showed him my submission with the Comic Sans that Robert Kirkman hated the lettering, and he said, "Okay, I'm going to tell you this because I want to teach you something. My book and your book are sitting next to each other on the shelf. You have $5. Which book are you going to buy?" And all I did was win because I knew the answer. And it was a hard, bitter pill to swallow, but it was the most important. I have a copy of his book that he autographed for me in my car. I carry it with me everywhere as a reminder.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. Wanderlust. He put it out through Image in like 2007, 2008. And it was the most valuable lesson I learned in comics is that I have to compete with Marvel and DC for $5.
There you go.
If I want to succeed. So that's probably my main piece of advice.
I love it. That's awesome. All right, and then where obviously we talked about Soko. When is Soko coming out?
April 12th. Go to the store. Tell people you want to read it. Buy 10 copies so you can get that retailer chase incentive.
Or 25, 25.
Or 20, or 50, whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'll sign them all for you. Mail them to me. I'll pay the postage to mail it back.
There you go. And then you can go pre-order those that are our buddies at Grey Ghost Comics, Andrew and Scott. Go check them out.
If you're in the Tifton area, go to Grey Ghost Comics.
Or you know what? Message them. They'll ship. So it's good.
Yeah. Andrew would ship anything. I think Andrew would climb in a box and go to your house.
That's what I'm talking
Eat
about.
out your refrigerator. But
Exactly.
he's that comfortable with people. He's a good dude.
He is. Absolute amazing crew. But yeah, so go check it out. Check out Soko. Check out Sumerian Comics. They've got some great stuff. I actually picked out a couple this weekend. What's the I don't remember the title, so I feel bad, but it was like How They Became a Babysitter or something like that.
How I Became a Shoplifter?
A shoplifter, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was editing number 3. I was actually emailing with Tom before this.
Yeah.
For the podcasting.
Yeah, so I picked that up this weekend. So that's in the repile. So I'll get to it in like 2 weeks. But I picked that one up this weekend. So check out Sumerian Comics. They've got some amazing stuff coming out. Again, Soko's coming out in April. Go ask your comic book stores for it now. Everybody have a great one.
Don't forget, your Kickstarter for Sheldor is still live.
Oh, yeah. I have a Kickstarter, Sheldor the Defender, all ages comic book. Go check it out. Yeah.
Again, that's what I do. The stuff you don't want to do.
Yeah.
He's your hype man. You got to have a hype man.
Gotta have a hype man. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great one.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us.